Join UF Hall of Famer and 14-year NFL vet Shane Matthews every weekday as he brings you all you need to know about your Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions with some of the biggest names in sports. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or watch us live at 8 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Good morning and welcome to a Tuesday edition of the program. It's a live edition. PodUp with Matthews in the morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Got a good show lined up for you today. We're going to have Bob Redman from Florida Victorious, and then we'll have Graham Hall for 24/7 Sports. But let's go to I failed to mention yesterday real quick before we get to Bob. Congratulations to Ricky Castillo. Gets into his first pro tournament on the Korn Ferry and wins the damn thing. So, boy, what a month it's been for him. And if you missed it last night, LSU loses a 2-0 lead late to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. They're now have to play Tennessee in an elimination game. My thoughts and prayers go out to folks back in my home state, down in the Moss Point, Pascagoula area. Tornadoes just devastated it last night. Let's go to the Titan MR hotline, and we're joined by Bob Redman, as I said, from Florida Victorious. Good morning, Bob. How you doing, man? Getting any sleep?
Oh, yeah. I got a little bit of sleep last night. We'll see how it goes today. But, yeah, I think I got a little bit.
Well, I wanted to bring you on. I mean, obviously, I guess it was Saturday. You know, I get on Twitter every now and then, Bob, just kind of see what's going on. And all hell was breaking loose because Austin Simmons commits to Ole Miss, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple hours later, Billy gets 3 or 4 stars to commit, and then the snowball effect has started. What is causing this, and can we expect more players in the next couple of days?
Yeah, I think that I think the biggest couple of things, right? And I was teasing on Twitter that it took Billy to get mad about the Simmons thing. You know, Kiffin tweeted out a couple of things about it after it happened too. So, but in all seriousness, it's the last big weekend, official visit weekend of the summer of June. And so, it's most of the kids have taken pretty much the visits they're going to take. They had maybe 1 or 2 left. Some of them did. So a lot of them could figure out that they wanted to make their mind. The big thing was they did it on a Saturday. Usually they wait till Sunday and do their thing, and they didn't do that this time. And I don't know if it was spurred on by the Simmons thing where, you know what, let's quit waiting on this stuff. Let's get it out there and let's do this. I don't know if that's why they did it on a Saturday. But I think for the most part, it's about the fact that it's just the last, at least for Florida, it's the last visit weekend for June.
Yeah. We had a couple of questions here for you, Bob, on Facebook Live, brought to you by Mellon Law. Andy says, Bob, how important has DJ Lagway been in helping the recruiting process? And is there any concern that none of these recent high-level recruits are from the state of Florida?
You know, that is I'll take the last question first, and then you might have to remind me of the first one in a minute. But that is something that I have pondered. Billy has made it his priority to form a 4.5-hour circle around Gainesville and really recruit that area, right? Now, there's going to be times when there's just not prospects of the level at certain positions that you're going to have to go out of that. I think offensive line this year is one of those. I think defensive tackle might be another. And so they ended up doing that. They ended up going out and getting a couple of kids from Georgia at defensive tackle. So it is different this year. I think, first of all, I think your quarterback's going to come from wherever he comes from, right? If you're at this school and the way you want to recruit at this school, your quarterback's just going to have to be a high level kid. And there might not be one in the state of Florida. So you're going to have to, a lot of times, go out of state. They got Lagway in early. And so that's that. certain guys like Xavier Filsame, who's from Texas, is also really from Florida. He just happens to be in Texas now, so he's got a lot of roots here. So there's some things like that. But I I think it crossed my mind a lot about the Florida thing. But when you're recruiting at this high level and you're getting kids from at this high level from out of state, I think you just go with it. It's not necessarily what he does.
No, you have to. I mean, if you think about some of the greatest football players in the history of our program, a lot of them weren't from the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Rex Grossman, Percy Harvin. I mean, you can go on and on and on.
Shane Matthews.
Well, I said some of the greatest. I'm just wanting to kind of, yeah. But speaking of that, it's great to see that we picked up a kid, the top player in the state of Mississippi, my home state.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about him from Picayune, Mississippi.
A blur. He can get after it. Edge guy. I forget his first name all of a sudden because I've been up all night, but Waller is his last name. Give me a second. I'm sorry. Jamonta Waller. So a blur of an outside linebacker type player, a guy that is going to get after the quarterback. And if you watch his film, he literally nobody can touch him when he's in a heading towards the ball carrier. Nobody can get in his way. He's just that quick. So probably the top player in the state of Mississippi, which I think says something. And to go out there and get that and bring him back. And honestly, Florida has several guys still at that type of position, to edge guys that they could actually, I think, land in this class. But he's got to be up there with, one or two of the top ones that they were recruiting this cycle.
We're speaking with Bob Redman here from Florida Victorious here on the Titan MR Hotline. Rose Ogre State Farm offers a team of dedicated insurance professionals ready to help life go right with the right insurance option for you and your family. Visitogreinsurance.com. Give them a call at 352-240-1779. My question is, how many more kids you think or do we have available to sign in this or have commit in the 24 class? Obviously, you can go probably have many verbal commitments as you want, but what number are they looking at, Bob?
Yeah, I have learned in the last several years that question honestly doesn't matter. I mean, they can't take 30, but I think they're going to try. I think when you're recruiting at this level and there are still a handful of kids that are really high level like this that you're going to take, and still some needs that they have to fill. They need to get more defensive backs. They need to get another tight end. They need to get another running back. And so there are certain needs they still have to fill. I don't think their intention was to really sign 25, but I think they'll sign 25, and they'll figure it out. I think that's the motto: is sign them and get them figure it out later. And it didn't used to be that way. Everything was tight. You had to worry about shuffling the roster and get maybe somehow running off kids that and worried about the coaches, the high school coaches of those kids. But if some players don't end up playing and getting on the field, they want to go somewhere where they can play. And I think that's what you'll see with this class is, I think the original thought was maybe 22, but I think they go to 25 because of the way things are falling right now.
Okay, I'm going to, on the Titan MR text line, we got a comments from Chuck, and we're going to drop it after this. It's about Austin Simmons. Okay. It's very long. Okay. Austin Simmons. First of all, my question to you is a two-part question. It's really long. He basically wants to know what happened. Well, here's what I think happened. Well, you saw the comments that his dad made, said he didn't feel like he wanted competition. The schedule was too hard, blah, blah, blah. But Bob, I don't understand how he's 17 years old and still has 2 years of eligibility left in high school, and how you have over a 5-point whatever GPA when you're homeschooled. Right. I also heard that he's a really good baseball pitcher, but is it true that I'm not throwing Kevin O'Sullivan knows what he's doing, but I don't think they thought he could help their baseball program either. Had that have anything to do with him going to Ole Miss? I mean, first of all, I was 17 when I got on campus in summer B, and I was not held back. So I just don't know how
Right.
you can be 17 and still have 2 years of school left.
Yeah, well, I think I've heard a couple of things like he's at Pahokee, and at Pahokee they have with their best players, they have a tendency to try to play them early, and some parents decide they don't want that for their children and they hold them back. So my understanding is he got held back a year. He was not going to be able to play. He's supposed to be a 2025 prospect. He was not going to be able to play in 2025 as a high schooler. So he was going to have to reclassify. He had just taken enough homeschool courses and passed the AP or whatever you want to call the test they call them now the days to get to a level to where he could actually get. He's probably got. I imagine with a GPA like that, he's probably already a sophomore in college with his classes right now. So the big thing was the homeschool allowed him to do all that. What was the other part of the questions here?
Well, I was told or I had heard, but you hear all kinds of stuff that there was no guarantee that he would be able to help the baseball team as a pitcher. Now, I mean, you don't really know how a guy's going to pan out when he gets to college against the way these guys throw. So I just think it's unique that he ended up going to Ole Miss because I don't know if he'll ever take a snap there because I think Walker Howard's their best quarterback.
Yeah, they're loaded at quarterback. They have a returning starter that's a sophomore, right? And brought in Walker Howard, and they actually signed another one in the last class, and they're adding another one. They have one coming for 2024 already. So they are loaded. I honestly don't believe he'll end up playing there. I think he'll be transferred. I think that whole situation, he'll be transferring out. I'll say this, in the baseball, the kid throws 90 plus and he's a left-hander. I don't talk to O'Sullivan, so I don't know what he's thinking, but a 90 plus left-hander he's got a lot of room to build his body and throw and get stronger. So I think, I have a hard time believing he can't use that at some point.
Well, if he throws 90 plus and he don't have no movement, I could go out there and hit him right now, Bob.
Right.
You got to have some movement. So we'll see.
Right.
That's just what I heard, but it's probably best that he didn't come here. Gene has a question here brought to you by Melton Law. He says, seems like the NIL is either fairly level across the SEC or is no longer as big an issue like it was last year with Texas A&M. Is my perception correct?
I think what we saw, with a couple of the big issues that happened last year and then Texas A&M, but the year before, you don't hear about those monster numbers. You don't hear about those really big contracts for quarterbacks and stuff like that, or whatever you want to call them. That just hasn't popped up this year. And I think it's just, I think it's all coming back to a level playing field. Georgia and Alabama don't do it that way. They will compensate, but they promise the kids that, once you get there and you start doing your thing, yes, you're going to get compensated at a high level and you're going to get coached up by the best. That's how they recruit. And it's really working for them. The problem is they can say that, and there aren't many programs that can actually say that right now until they actually do it. So I think the biggest thing is that those numbers that we heard for the last couple of years were so big, they had to come down, and they're doing that. And I think a lot of teams are, I think there's a lot of programs out there that promise things that they are not living up to, and they won't live up to, and that's changing it. And the kids find out, the kids talk. And so, and also when a kid signs at a school and that happens, they're going to leave because that's not what they signed up for, right? That's not what they were quote unquote told, even though they're not supposed to be told that during the process necessarily. So I think the big thing is those numbers were just so big for those really big kids that it's actually coming down to a level playing field. There's still some guys out there, and even Florida's recruiting them where the numbers are high, but not the multi-million whatever that you were hearing before.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. Another
Yeah.
text here on the Titan Mark text line from William. He says, Bob, who out of this 24 class excites you the most?
Oh, wow. I'll tell you what, I didn't watch his film because it was a real surprise to me that he came. But Amaris Williams, the edge guy that signed the other day, if you go watch his film, there's a couple of guys that were ranked and are currently ranked ahead of him, nationally. And he's better than those guys, and he's bigger and he's faster, and he really gets after it. I mean, he will punch you in the face, or he's able to run around you. So that when I watched his film, I was really impressed with Amaris Williams. Trying to think of who else could we talk about? Amir Jackson, the tight end. When Florida offered him back in late January, his only other Power 5 offer was Georgia Tech, and he had some others like Furman and stuff like that, but Georgia Tech was his only other Power 5. He's a Georgia kid, but he's a very athletic tight end. Just the kind of H-back tight end player that they're looking for. And he feels a great need. I know they have numbers right now at the position on tight end, but you're going to see a few move on from graduation, and maybe another one or two move on after the season. So that's a position they're going to end up signing too, I think, in this class. But Amir Jackson is another really talented player.
On the Titan Mark text line, a text from Betty in Jacksonville. She asked, Bob, can you explain to us the biggest difference between Florida Victorious and the Gator Collective, and when kids and families come on their visits, do they meet with Florida Victorious now?
Okay, they don't. I'll take the last part. They don't meet with Florida Victorious. They find out about it.
Okay.
And when we talk about when we talk about these NIL deals and stuff, that none of that's discussed. What ends up, the way that Florida sells it is through the players. And so, they tell the prospects, talk to the players and see what the players say about it. And the players, Florida, Billy, the one thing about Napier is he makes sure, and this goes to the whole Florida Victorious thing. He wants to make sure that if he writes a check, it gets cashed. And that's the way it works at Florida Victorious. So yes, they talk about it because it's part of the whole thing, but you can't discuss numbers and stuff like that. There's no whatever. It's all about talking to the players and seeing what they what they think of it, and then that the kids get to know, and they understand that it's a slotting system based on their talent, who else was recruiting them, how hard it was to, all that stuff is figured out, and they talk to the players about that thing. What was the other part of it?
I think
that was all of it.
Kind of the difference between Florida Victorious and the Gator Collective, that's what the old one was called, correct?
Right. And actually it's a Florida Victoria, the kind of two, it's not really a merge, but technically I guess it's a merge. So Florida Victorious used to be Florida Fast, FAST, and I cannot remember what the FAST stood for, but anyway, the two entities were working not together, but certainly not against each other before. And actually, in a sense, they were working together without being the same entity. So Florida Fast was and still is through Florida Victorious. They are a charitable organization. And what they do is they get the players to go out and work in the community and do service stuff like at the Ronald McDonald's House, the YMCA, Habitat for Humanity, those kind of things. And the players get compensated through NIL for that. The Gator Collective is a fan-based and not collective, but this part of Florida Victorious now, kind of when it merged from collective, is a fan-based organization where it's all about interacting with fans. So we'll have meet and greets where Florida Victorious patrons can show up and meet players. We had one in the summer, and it went great. It was a great time. I think 7, 8, maybe 9 players showed up at the social in Gainesville, and met with about 100 fans that actually showed up because it was a midday before a basketball game. So and then but that's the main thing. And then we do video interviews with them, allow them to get on a Zoom and ask questions of players and stuff like that. So it's more of a fan interaction thing. And that's how it works.
Yeah, and just so people know, it's more than football players. This involves all the athletes at the university. I think people get so enamored with the recruiting classes and what Florida Victorious can do for football players, but it goes all the way down to gymnastics, softball,
any sport,
women's track, you name it.
Yeah, any sport.
I laughed at this comment on Facebook Live from Tony. He says, just make the check out to cash and let them figure it out. Yeah.
So. I mean, the problem, this is a learning thing for the players too. I mean, it's not scholarship money where they get handed. They get a 1099. They have to pay taxes on it. So that's part of it too. When you if a player's making 10 grand, they're going to get taxed on that 10 grand. And so it's a learning experience for them, something that almost all of them haven't gone through yet.
I couldn't imagine making 10 grand when I played. That would have been crazy. So Bob, let me ask you this. Let's go to this year. Do you think, because you follow recruiting pretty heavily, do you think there's anybody or any position that Billy Napier and the staff may try to add before they go to training camp? Out of the portal?
Oh, out of the portal? Well, I'll say this. I don't know who's out there still. The quarterback situation. He knew about Austin Simmons coming back in on signing day on February 1st. And there was a quote in that February 1st thing where he mentioned we're going to get another quarterback, but I can't remember the exact quote, but you could tell it wasn't going to be another portal quarterback. And I think he may have been asked that, and he said no. So that was something. He does want another arm in camp, so that could be the case. Other than that, I don't think they're going to add anybody. It would have to be, and honestly, for the most part, it would have to be a certain situation for those, I think, for any of them to play now. I could be wrong, but there's a certain point where the window's gone and they have to be in, and I'm not sure if we're beyond that point. So I honestly think quarterback would be the only thing, but it's not going to be, I don't think it will be a young guy. I think it would be another older guy that's willing to come in and just compete for the job.
Andy's got a question here for you, brought to you by Mountain Law on Facebook. Says, Bob, is there any doubt that DJ Lagway will be our starting QB game 1 in 2024?
Well,
I think a lot of it depends on how the quarterbacks play this year.
I don't think that's necessarily what the intention was, quite honestly. I don't think they want to put that kind of pressure on him. I think that, it could depend on how Graham Mertz does this year. Does Mertz play pretty well and well enough to stick around for another year? I don't think the intention is for that to happen like that. I don't think it was anyway. So I can't rule it out. But I would actually say no at this point. Not on game one. And people or might be surprised by it, but Emmitt Smith didn't start in game 1. It took him game 4 to start. So it's it's just the way it is with young guys, and coaches. Coaches are not apt to play young guys a lot of times. if they can get away with it. Now, if he's the best guy out there, they're going to do it. And DJ, the one thing about DJ is he is the ultimate competitor. He doesn't care if there's 10 quarterbacks on the roster. He really, really doesn't. He wants to come in and compete and thinks he's going to take it. So maybe he can. Like I said, I can't rule it out, but I don't think that's the intention.
Yeah, I would be shocked if that happens, quite honestly. Right. And again, a lot of it depends on how Graham Mertz plays this year, how the offense performs, what the record is, things like that. But boy, throwing a true freshman out there with that schedule in 2024. Bob, you've been around the Gators a long time. You ever seen a schedule as difficult as the one in 2024?
Yeah, that's nuts. That's nuts. I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, is Miami going to be the Miami they are this year? Who knows? You know, people are probably saying the same thing about Florida right now, but it is nuts. When they, you know, you come out with the SEC part of it, and it's like, wow, that's pretty good, and then you add Florida State and Miami as two of the other teams. It's like, it's crazy. It is. It's I can't remember one quite like that. And you know, I say that, but back in the day, I think some of the SEC teams were brutal and probably not getting the respect because they were in conference. They weren't getting the respect they should have. So, but you know, for Florida to play, not the one thing about the Gators over time, over the last few decades, has been that most of their games have been in the state of Florida. You know, the non-conference and the even the Georgia game and stuff like that. So that's kind of made it a little bit of a different thing for them.
All right, last question for you. We get you out of here, Bob. This is from John on the Titan Lamar text line. He says, Bob, as long as you've been around the Gator football program, have you ever seen a head football coach as calculated as Billy Napier?
Calculate? I think Spurrier was pretty calculated.
In a different way, though. In a different way.
Definitely different. I think Billy's got ultimate patience. He really does. He has a system, and this is how we're going to do it. And I'm not going to stray from that system. And he just stays with it. And it's actually, until we see things like this happen this weekend, I think people get frustrated with that. Yeah, I mean, if you look at everything he does, like he built the staff, the 100-member staff or whatever he has, 50 guys, 60. I mean, that certainly is calculated, right? He's trying to have all his bases covered. And that's something you don't see. But I mean, Spurrier and Urban were pretty calculated guys. They knew how to do their thing. And but Billy's a different animal for sure, just because I think he's much more of a people person. And I think the staff just really, really, really likes working for him. And I think that's something that's going for him. And I think when kids get on campus for visits, they see that. And that's part of the one thing for me where I haven't figured. I've been wondering why there hasn't been more weekends like we just had. I really have been, because these visits, these kids just come out glowing, and it's real. It's not fake. It's real. And, it just, I've wondered for the first year, but I think they're building relationships now. The staff has these longer relationships with these kids, and that pays off.
Jason says on Facebook, like Gators killing it on recruiting defense, still a bit concerned on the O-line. Hope they make another big step forward this year. Going to need it in 2024. Napier going to need it this year to stay off the hot seat. Jason, he ain't on the hot seat. Trust me, he is not on the hot seat. Bob, good stuff as always. We appreciate your time. Let everybody know how they can get involved with Florida Victorious.
Well, it's simple. FloridaVictorious.com. Just go check it. They redid their website, and has everything there. You can come in, you could make, if you want to, make a monthly pledge, or you can come in and make a one-time pledge. We had a lot of those yesterday when things really started clicking over the weekend. We had a lot of people want to call in and do a one-time pledge, but just go to floridavictorious.com. Check it out. We've got a lot of celebrities that work with the organization that they'll end up seeing over time. It's right now it's doing well, and this is what it's actually going to take. This is what I posted on Twitter. I said it really does take an army. It does. It takes an army of people, and that's what they're trying to build at Florida Victorious.
Yeah, Bob, good stuff. Appreciate your time, my man.
All right, thanks, Shane.
That's Bob Redman from Florida Victorious. Join us on the Titan More Hotline. Take a quick time out. Come back. We'll be joined by Graham Hall from 24/7 Sports. You're watching and listening to PodUp Matthews in the Morning.
We want to take this moment to thank our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law attorneys of the Florida Gators. Peaceland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte.
Campus USA Credit Union.
QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Dave & Buster's, eat, drink, play, and watch. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Celebration Point Town Center, Chris Doring Mortgage, Silverback Concrete Co., Ruse Ogre State Farm Insurance, Doreen Wibby, Realtor Caldwell Banker, MM Parish. Our touchdown sponsors are Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteak, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Aver and Smith, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Cube Billiards and Sports Bar. If you're interested in promoting your business on the show, call Freddie at 352-284-3733. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Hi, Steve Spurrier here. You know, making a reservation at my restaurant is easier than a Saturday afternoon homecoming game against Vandy. You don't have to call or email. Just go to spurriers.com, hit the reservation button, pick a date, a number of guests, and a time. It's so simple, I can do it. In fact, I just did. Maybe I'll see you tonight.
Welcome back to the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Celebration Points, where the Gators go to celebrate with premium brands like Regal Cinemas, Prime and Pearl, Dave & Buster's, Nike, Skechers, F45, and the HBC's restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, the #1 celebrity polished casual restaurant, all of America. See you at Celebration Point. Real quick, we got a Facebook Live here before we get to Graham Hall. Jason says, I hope you're right, Shane. Do you think we have 8 wins this year? Seems like Napier's setting up to go run heavy and rely on the defense to limit scoring with us. I do think we win 8 games. We're going to throw the football. Do not worry about that. We will throw the football. Let's go to the Titan MR Highline. We're joined by one of the best in the business from 24/7 Sports, Graham Hall. Good morning, Graham. How you doing, my man?
And good to be here, Shane. It's too kind of you. Always my pleasure to join the show. You know, I'm starting to be more with you also to answer that question about 8 wins. You said it about a month ago when I was on the show. I was closer to the camp of 5 and 6, but the more I think about it, if the Gators can run the football and that defense, especially the interior of the defensive line, has improved, this is a team that could win 8 games. I don't want to say easily, but there is a very foreseeable path to 8 wins now in my mind.
Well, you know, it's crazy because you got these projected win totals out in Vegas, and then you'll have On 3 come out with a top 25. I saw their top 25 though. They had Gators like ranked 21st. So we'll see. Like I told you, in my opinion, there's only 2 teams on paper better than the Florida Gators, and that's LSU and Georgia. We got to go play the games and see. All right, big weekend for the Gators. I don't know if we've had one like this in a long time. You're very involved following these athletes. You're like a storm chaser. You chase them to the airport to talk to them and their families. Just give us your thoughts of what happened this past weekend.
Yeah, huge credit to Blake Alderman, first of Swamp 247. If you're not following him, you absolutely should. As a Florida fan, he's always out there at the facility talking to prospects, getting a sense of where things stand. And a huge credit to him. He felt from the jump that Florida was in line to add multiple commitments this weekend. He was someone who spoke to Jamonte Waller when Waller left campus on Sunday. And even though Waller had a firm commitment date of August 26th, which was his birthday, it often can be kind of tough to get those top ranked prospects. This is a top 100 prospect in the composite and someone who's the 28th ranked prospect by 247 Sports, which makes him a 5-star prospect. I mean, you rarely get those prospects to change their decision date, especially when they have Georgia, LSU, Auburn, you name it, all these teams vying for them, Penn State. I mean, for Florida to end up getting him to no longer consider taking that Georgia visit and to then move up his commitment date to coming out of the weekend, that is incredibly impressive in my mind. I know everyone's been saying, well, where are the commitments? You can't just solely rely off of having impressive visits time and time again. You got to get some of these kids to pop. Well, Florida just answered all those questions. They completely just did that, landing 7 guys, the span of 50-something hours. Incredibly impressive in my mind. And you end up getting 5 top 100 guys. And now that's the number 3 ranked class in the nation, where if you were only paying attention as to last Thursday, last Friday, Florida was sitting just inside the top 25 in those team recruiting rankings at number 22. So you make the 19 spot leap. I mean, that is a program changing weekend potentially, Shane.
Yeah. Andy asked here. Well, first of all, Tony says on Facebook Live, Shane, you might have to give Graham a few shots, but I hear his golf game is coming along.
That's kind. If low 90s is coming along, I appreciate you. I can do a few things, I'll say that, but I need some more help than the Florida recruiting class does.
All right. Andy's question was, Graham, is there a player we've seen that is similar to the skills of Jamonte Waller that he'll bring, like a Will Anderson? If he's like Will Anderson, holy crap, from Alabama?
Yeah, absolutely. If he can be a guy who can consistently put pressure on the quarterback and play a variety of roles, Florida sees him fitting into that jack linebacker position in the defense, which you haven't heard really, I think, too much about in the last 6 months from Florida, because they've overhauled that defense and so many players are listed just at edge on the roster rather than at jack. But that's kind of one of the similar roles to the jack. It's going to do a lot of similar things. The guy could be on the edge, rush the quarterback, drop into coverage. I think that this is a guy with a very unique skill set. There are still certainly some questions about him in my mind. He told us that he's listed at 6'1", 239. I think you still need to continue improving. Maybe that's not the ideal height that you maybe would want at the position, but this is someone his statistics just do not lie. I mean, double-digit sacks and tackles for loss last season. When you're playing in competitive football in the state of Georgia, those aren't a fluke by any means. This is someone that Florida thinks can play a very specific role within the defense. And yeah, I think Will Anderson is a great comp. I hate to even throw out a guy like Brenton Cox or even Princely Umanmielen, because those guys are a little bit bigger than him. But when you talk about technique as a pass rusher, I think that's something that jumps out. Very physical for his size, speedy, great agility. This is someone who can be a mismatch for opposing tackles. And I think that Florida really thinks that they found a gem, maybe a diamond in the rough in a sense, because again, you go through 24/7's projection. This is someone who I think is evaluated a little bit differently depending on what site you look at. There are some sites that I'm not going to mention competitors, but there's some sites that are a little more concerned about his height than 24/7 is. So in short, this is another significant piece for the Gators, absolutely a significant one, but they have to keep building from here, especially on the offensive side of the ball as they continue filling out this class. But when you get someone like this that can help recruit and add to the momentum, I mean, you look at social media, the amount of promising players that came out and were just taking notice of what the Gators did over the past 3 days, from Hawkins, I mean, you name it, Denson, guys who had maybe looked elsewhere in the last week, looking at Penn State, looking at Alabama, and now they see what Florida just did. That momentum factor is absolutely something that can't be understated. The Gators need to keep building off of that, especially because a little bit of a change to the schedule this weekend on Friday in 3 days is Friday Night Lights. People, I think, especially Florida fans, are used to that being at the end of July. It's going to be at the end of June. So Florida's going to capitalize off of this upcoming weekend. This is really just momentum building into the weekend. They're going to have a bunch of commits back on campus this weekend, along with some top remaining targets as well. And I hate to kind of say and build some hype that it can get better from here, but that's the reality for Florida. This is just a piece in the final push to the end of June, which is coming up for this weekend. So you can't really look away right now after what Florida's doing, because they can get even better from here, Shane.
Yeah, Asa has a question here about committing. Are they signing a letter of intent? No, it's all a verbal commitment. None of that happens until signing day, which would be late December is the early signing period, right? Or in February. But it's an exciting time. But again, none of these guys are signed, sealed, and delivered to be Gators, because things can happen during their high school career. They could change their mind. Joseph has a question here about the 5-star Jordan Ross.
Yeah, I don't really know where Florida stands right now in his recruitment. That could be one where he looks elsewhere. But absolutely, I think that Florida, what they did initially with him, I think was very, very promising. We'll have to see here if things change again, because this is a 365-day-a-year type thing where you have to recruit nonstop or you die. But let me just go back to your previous point real quick, Shane, because I do think it's worth addressing. I said on here a little while ago that coaches have never had more control. But one of the things that I think you can say on the flip side, the glass half full perspective, is that look at last year when Florida landed commitments and who they got in outside of Jaden Rashada. I mean, they got that entire class really to stick last year after a 6 and 7 finish. And we're both sitting here talking about expecting better results this season. So I think that should tell you that a lot of these guys, especially in the NIL era, are more, I think, ready to, when they make a commitment, to stick. I know that we see flips all the time, but this staff last year and in the NIL era makes you think that a lot of these commitments are going to be a lot more firm, and you're a little less open to losing guys when your class falls apart, especially because we're seeing so many June commitments now with the amount of official visits. I think a lot more of these guys will end up sticking in this class. You're still going to have players who end up being pushed out. That happens, unfortunately, everywhere. But one of the things that this staff could end up doing is if they create that advantage for themselves, they can continue assessing every single position rather than having to kind of get some of the ones remaining, which has certainly been the thing that you've seen previous coaching staffs do. Again, kind of to remain vague, I don't want to take any shots at anyone, but you want to be able to consistently assess your options. And if you have to push out anyone for a better prospect, I know that's a difficult process, but it ends up being better for your team in the long run.
The Chris Doring Mortgage, they do mortgage lending right, helping home buyers throughout Gainesville and North Central Florida. Call Chris Doring Mortgage today at 352-244-0840. Speaking with Graham Hall from 24/7 Sports on the Titanmore Hotline. All right, we got a couple of questions here for you. Thomas says, any wide receivers or running backs on the board, any certain names we need to look out for?
Yeah, I think that Florida pretty set right now at running back. They obviously could, knowing what we've said about Billy Napier's inclination to run the football, run first offense, they absolutely could add another running back. They love Kane Daniels, obviously. I think that that's someone who extremely beneficial to the program. They feel is underrated. I may tend to agree with them from what I've seen on film, and maybe most important from an intangible perspective from him, he is out here recruiting. I mean, he is a huge reason why Florida just landed Jamonte Waller. Those are two guys from the state of Mississippi. And when he hasn't been on campus, Waller, apparently KD was blowing up his phone nonstop trying to get him to commit. So you want guys like that in your class who are going to play the role of recruiter as well for you. I don't think they're going to expand and take another running back. I obviously could be wrong. But when it comes to wide receiver, I just mentioned Dre Hawkins. I think that's a huge one to watch right now this week. Here's why. He left his official visit saying the Gators were right there in the top. I get the sense it's Florida and Penn State for him. What the Nittany Lions end up doing at the wide receiver position, I think may determine where Hawkins ends up going. I think that Penn State may end up taking another wide receiver instead of Hawkins. And I think that means Hawkins is going to choose the Gators. This is a highly, highly rated guy. And if you can end up getting him to go to Florida, like I said, the amount of offensive pieces that this team needs, that could be another jump start for your recruiting, because you need guys like that, guys who can be, gadget guys who have agility, can get out in open space. This coaching staff loves to use the comparison of two players when they're bringing in these top wide receivers. Billy Napier loves to throw out Jalen Waddle, and of course, Billy Gonzalez loves to talk about Kadarius Toney. It's the latter, Toney, that they think Hawkins could kind of evolve into being. So I think if they can end up getting a commitment from that guy later this week, that would be a huge boost for this class, but still some work to be done, and you got to watch what Penn State ends up doing.
Joseph has an interesting comment here, and I agree with him a little bit because I talk and I deal with a lot of high school coaches, and they hate the transfer portal. He says the transfer portal is putting pressure on high school kids to make those commitments because they could lose their spot to a transfer if they mess around. What do you think about that? I think that's legit because there's coaches are trying to improve their roster. And an easy way to do that is get guys who are experienced and have produced at some other school. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you go back to what Florida did last year, signing 20 high school guys for a transition class in the past. That would not have been enough. But you have the transfer portal where you can keep adding over the next 6 months. Florida added 9 by that first week of February, but then they go out and add three more, before we get to June here. So certainly that is something that's open most of the year. They can continue assessing that, and you can get guys on campus in windows through the transfer portal that you can't at the high school level. You can get them on campus in June, July. That is just, it is a huge bonus for programs. And I think that we talked about this recently. Billy Napier takes a patient approach, right? He's not going to just fill his roster spots with guys that are, I hate to say dead weight, but maybe not up to the caliber of player that you would like at the University of Florida, right? If you're going after blue chip prospects or guys who are able to step in and compete year one, that maybe is going to make you either take the top guys or you're going to go out there and take transfer portal guys who can compete in year one. I've said this about basketball and about football, but it really is kind of seen now as a waste of a roster spot to take someone that you don't think is going to contribute in any capacity in year one. I hate to say that redshirting as a freshman is now a detriment because it is so beneficial for players. But as a coach, when you could maybe use that spot for the transfer portal and improve your team in the short term at a higher rate, especially the unspoken thing that we're missing here is that Florida's schedule is, I think, changing a little bit of what their roster building, what they can do. We saw that this past weekend when Austin Simmons flipped from Florida to Ole Miss, and his dad came out and cited the schedule. I think that is a huge factor here. As much as you would like to take players that you're confident will develop in 2-3 years, if you're Billy Napier and his coaching staff, are you going to get that opportunity if you end up going, 4-8 or 5-7 over the next 2 years? I think that is something you absolutely have to consider. So there are players, especially at Florida, at the high school level, that are going to miss out on a chance to be developed by the staff because of the schedule, because of the transfer portal, because of the need to contribute right away. That's why when you see these interviews of offensive linemen, defensive linemen coming out, one of the things that Florida's coaching staff is repeatedly saying to these guys is, we think you can play early. What that means is we are willing to take you because we think that you are going to contribute to our program early, when in the past, maybe along the line, you would be given a little bit more time to develop, get physically ready, but you can't do that as much right now in the transfer portal era.
I agree. Dan has a question for you here, brought to you by Malala. Graham, who do you have winning today, Oral Roberts or TCU?
That's a tough one. I'm actually going to go TCU. I think that TCU has what it takes. Again, a really good Oral Roberts team, but I think that TCU is a more complete team. I think they're really kind of scary good right now. I know that Florida just one win away from the College World Series final, but you can't take either one of those teams lightly. I think TCU wins today, and it's going to be tough for Florida on Wednesday to make sure that they punch their ticket. That's a team that you have to be at your absolute best at. I'm going TCU, but you never really know. So much parity in the game. I could look crazy here in a couple hours.
Yeah. Speaking of baseball, is Max Brown, is he still playing baseball? Do they have like a postseason roster, or is he on it?
He's not on it. No, he's
Okay.
not traveling with the team right now. He is doing football workouts. He was the guy that contributed with them in spring. Really was just kind of just on the roster to continue for him, providing a little bit to that locker room, but also for him to, I think, get a sense of some winning culture. I want to give a shout out to Kevin O'Sullivan. You know, there are no harms in being around that program. And I think that when you're looking for a leader, especially at the quarterback position, being in an uncomfortable environment, a place where you are maybe at the bottom of the totem in a sense, seeing how that organization runs, seeing the expectations, when you go back into the football building, I think you have a different perspective and that maybe can push you further. That's what I think Florida was looking for a good bit from Brown. He obviously is a great talent on the diamond. I don't think he ever expected to contribute for that team, but it could not hurt him to get that experience. He didn't really miss any spring training workouts. They divided his schedule really, really well, Kevin O'Sullivan and Billy Napier, so that he was able to do as much with each program as possible without having anything fall by the wayside from a football standpoint. So he's not right now competing with them or traveling with them. Obviously, football is a priority, but I think it was a really valuable experience for him just getting a chance to be around that program.
JB says you're even wearing TCU colors. Is that purple or is that a royal?
No, it's blue. This is blue. It's just dark in here. It's a blue Under Armour shirt. I promise you. I promise you.
Good deal. Hey, Graham, before we let you go, let everybody know how they can follow you on Twitter and look at all your work.
That didn't really help, but you can follow me on Twitter at GrahamHall_. Read me at Swamp247. A lot of recruiting content coming out, a few more lists about the football season. We can love to have some great debates with everyone on the message board community. Again, follow Blake Alderman for recruiting coverage and absolutely follow Jacob Rudner. He is out in Omaha for as long as the Gators are out there covering the team from practice to games to after the game. Make sure you follow him at Jacob Rudner on Twitter. And looking forward to being back real soon because I think we'll have a lot of recruiting talk to mention. And SEC Media Days right around the corner. The Gators going on Wednesday. And it's going to be an interesting time. Billy Napier said last month that this team was going to have a fourth scholarship quarterback on the roster before the season. Will that still happen? I think that he's going to be asked about that in the near future because Florida may have to go with a contingency plan. So looking forward to talking it all with you next time, Shane. It's always a pleasure to be on here with you, man.
Yeah, and you said Friday Night Lights is this Friday night?
It's June 23rd. Yep, it's this Friday. Florida will have official visitors throughout the entire weekend. So a lot of news coming. Guys who aren't even here for an official visit will be in the swamp, in the indoor practice facility, weather permitting. So a lot of players will be on campus, more than 100, not just the double-digit official visitors. It's going to be a huge weekend this weekend. So get your rest this week while you can because a lot of news coming your way in a few days.
Can the general public come to that? I can't remember.
Yeah, so they can't. If it's in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, if it's not raining, they can't keep the general public out. If it's in the IPF, they'll stop people from coming in. But if you're in Gainesville and you got nothing to do on Friday night and you want to see, I mean, there have been some legendary ones. We talked about a legendary weekend when we started. The vibes I got from this past weekend were FNL in 2017 when you had Jamar Chase, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, the amount of players on campus, Matt Corral. You get guys like that to FNL, 5-star players. People talk about it for years to come. So that's what this staff is looking to do, and they're looking to get some commitments out of this weekend as well.
Good stuff. Appreciate your time, Graham, and we'll talk to you soon, bud.
Always my pleasure. Y'all take care out there. Thanks, Shane.
Yep, that's Graham Hall. Join us on the Titan MR Hotline. Let's get to This Day in Sports, brought to you by Campus USA Credit Union. Put some star power to work in your financial life with Campus USA Credit Union. This day in 1982 at the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach, Tom Watson wins his only U.S. Open over the Golden Bear, Jack Nicklaus. That's brought to you by Campus USA Credit Union. Silverback Concrete is a family-led team of heavy concrete specialists that build commercial structures with unrivaled quality. I really want to thank Bob Redman and Graham Hall for joining our program. We needed some updates on all these great recruits that have verbally committed. Remember, they're verbally committed, but I do agree that the transfer portal has changed verbal commitments because, boy, if you don't take that offer, you may not get another one. So we appreciate them taking their time. Today, you got TCU Oral Roberts. We'll find out who the Gators play tomorrow night. And if you missed it last night, LSU loses to Wake Forest. Wake comes from behind and wins 3-2 over the Bayou Bengals. Hope you enjoyed today's program. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Take care.